The Democrats subpoena Rudy Giuliani. The Australia Trump scandal turns out not to be so much of a scandal, and activists attempt to stop Ben Shapiro from speaking at Boston University. And we'll talk about all that today. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and this is The Giraldo Show. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for listening. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you're listening to The Giraldo Show. We are back to our regularly scheduled time, 1 p.m. on October 1st. Finally, we're in October, and we have some very good news for everyone today. Well, not good news. I guess I could say breaking news. The first breaking news, the Democrats are going to subpoena Rudy Giuliani. Now, for those who don't know, Rudy Giuliani, he was involved in quotes in the entire Ukraine collusion, I should say. And he was mentioned by President Zelensky for being a good person, and Donald Trump admits it, and he said that he would have subpoena give President Zelensky a call about the entire Joe Biden investigation. So let's get into that story today. For those who might be wondering, what is a subpoena? A subpoena is a writ ordering a person to attend a court. So here's the letter that the Democrats used to subpoena Rudy Giuliani. So, on Monday, the Democrat-led House Intelligence Committee subpoenaed President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, as part of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry into Trump's alleged attempt to pressure Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to interfere in the 2020 election by investigating former Vice President and current Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. In a letter signed by House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Eliot Engel, and House Oversight Committee Chair Elijah Cummings, and posted on the House Oversight Committee's official website Monday, Giuliani is ordered to produce information by October 15th related to the Democrats' Ukraine investigation. So, a lot of people signing a letter to get Giuliani to produce information that involves the Ukraine investigation. And Adam Schiff, for those who don't know, made up a whole bunch of stuff about Donald Trump and what he said in that letter, saying that he literally is pressuring, even though the transcript has been out for about a week at this point, a little bit under a week. And none of what Adam Schiff says was actually in that transcript. And I had an episode previously, I believe it was 2 or 3 episodes ago, where I mentioned that Adam Schiff had some pretty indecent things to say about Donald Trump, to say the least. So, here's how the letter begins. Pursuant to the House of Representatives impeachment inquiry, we are hereby transmitting a subpoena that compels you to produce the documents set forth in the accompanying schedule by October 15th, 2019. This subpoena is being issued by the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence under the rules of the House of Representatives in exercise of its oversight and legislative jurisdiction and after consultation with the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Committee on Oversight and Reform. The subpoenaed documents shall be collected as part of the House's impeachment inquiry and shall be shared among the committees as well as with the Committee on the Judiciary as appropriate. Your failure or refusal to comply with the subpoena, including at the direction or behest of the President or the White House, shall constitute evidence of obstruction of the House's impeachment inquiry and may be used as an adverse inference against you and the President. The committees are investigating the extent to which President Trump jeopardized national security by pressing Ukraine to interfere with our 2020 election and by withholding security assistance provided by Congress to help Ukraine counter Russian aggression, as well as any efforts to cover up these matters. Okay, pretty long first part that I read, so let me go ahead and cut it down. Obviously, that first part of the letter mentioned that Rudy Giuliani must set forth documents that apparently prove the Ukraine collusion story by October 15th. So that is going to be in a couple of weeks. So we'll see on that day, we'll see what happens with those documents. The subpoena is being issued by the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence under the rules of the House of Representatives in exercise of its oversight and legislative jurisdiction and after consultation with the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Committee of Oversight and Reform. So again, that's a pretty long, but in a nutshell, the subpoena is being issued by that committee, and it's all about the House's impeachment inquiry and the Donald Trump investigation. It's going to be shared among the committees with the Committee on the Judiciary as appropriate, and it's pretty much at the end saying if you fail or you refuse to produce any documents, that will be a clear sign of obstruction of justice against the inquiry, and it will be bad against President Trump and Giuliani. So Giuliani is going to have to produce something if they don't want to get President Trump impeached for real, because an obstruction of justice could potentially be committed by Giuliani, but it could easily be led to Donald Trump. The letter continued by saying that they are investigating the extent to which President Trump jeopardized national security into pressuring Ukraine to interfere with the 2020 election by investigating Hunter Biden and his father, the former frontrunner, Joe Biden. Let's continue the letter. Our inquiry includes an investigation of credible allegations that you acted as an agent of the president in a scheme to advance his personal political interests by abusing the power of the office of the president. A growing public record, including your own statements, indicate that the president, you, and others appear to have pressed the Ukrainian government to pursue two politically motivated investigations. The first is a prosecution of Ukrainians who provided evidence against Mr. Trump's convicted campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. The second relates to former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr., who is challenging President Trump for the presidency in 2020. So the inquiry of the investigation, what they're asking Giuliani to get, actually involves two scandals, I guess you could say. The first one is the campaign of Donald Trump to the conviction of Paul Manafort, and the second relating to the Ukraine scandal with Joe Biden. For example, on September 19, 2019, you admitted on national television that you personally asked the government of the Ukraine to target Vice President Biden. During an interview on CNN, Chris Cuomo asked you, "Sir, did you ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?" You responded, "Of course I did." In addition to this stark admission, you stated more recently that you are in possession of evidence in the form of text messages, phone records, and other communications indicating that you were not acting along and that other Trump administration officials may have been involved in this scheme. The subpoena requires you to produce all of those communications and other related documents to the committees in order to determine the full extent of this effort by the president and his administration to press Ukraine to interfere in our 2020 election. Again, long paragraph and pretty much in a nutshell for those who kind of zoned out. September 19th, 2019, on TV, Giuliani admitted that he asked the president of Ukraine and the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. Chris Cuomo asking Giuliani on CNN, "Did you ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?" And Giuliani responded, "Of course he did." And he said, and the letter states that Giuliani stated that he is in possession of evidence, text messages, phone records, and other communications that indicated that he wasn't acting alone and that there are actually other people involved in the entire Trump-Ukraine scandal. The letter concludes by ordering Giuliani to contact staff for the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence to arrange for the production of the documents. "I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and he was shut down, and that was really unfair." This is what Trump told Zelensky. A lot of people are talking about that, the way they shut your very good prosecutor down and they had some very bad people involved. Mr. Giuliani is a very respected man. He was a mayor of New York City, a great mayor, and I would like him to call you. So this is pretty much what they're going to use against Giuliani, saying that President Trump clearly told Giuliani to call in Ukraine, and that may very well be possible. However, again, the media seems to forget that President Zelensky of Ukraine actually was the one who mentioned Giuliani's name first a couple of paragraphs before, but the media doesn't really want to get into that. The media also doesn't want to get into the obvious Biden scandal, where Biden allegedly, or he actually used the threat of withholding $1 billion in aid to Ukraine to force the removal of the country's top prosecutor who had been investigating Burisma for alleged corruption. And Burisma is the company that's hired Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, to pay him $50,000 for I don't know what, because Hunter Biden, he hasn't really had anything on his resume. He was in the Navy and he got discharged because of a positive cocaine test. So again, Hunter Biden, we don't know what he's done, and he just so happened to get a $50,000 a month job in Burisma, the largest oil or gas company in Ukraine. So it was a bit curious, to say the least, and Ukraine wanted to investigate that. And Biden said pretty much, he did say the quid pro quo, if you don't fire your prosecutor, I'm not going to give you $1 billion in aid. So big story for today with the Giuliani subpoena. We're going to go ahead and see on October 15th what happens, what Giuliani actually releases. Okay, next story of the day is the letter from Australian official that emerges that casts doubt on report from the New York Times. So there was a letter that emerged on Monday from the Australian government that directly disputed the accuracy of a New York Times report that claimed that President Donald Trump pushed Australia to help Attorney General William Barr investigate the origins of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation in an attempt to discredit the investigation and what the Times claimed was an example of Trump using high-level diplomacy to advance his personal political interests. So, for those who do not know, recently there was a New York Times reported that Donald Trump communicated with Australia and the government to attempt to investigate Robert Mueller Mueller and in his Russia investigation to try to find out what was up with that, what was the source of that. So this letter that was reported by 9 News Australia's Kiri Yaxley is dated May 28th, 2019, so a couple months back. And it's from Australian Ambassador Joe Hockey to Barr and states, "Dear Attorney General, I refer to President Trump's announcement on the 24th of May that you will investigate the origins of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's probe into Russian links into the 2016 election. I note that the President referred to Australia, the United Kingdom, and the Ukraine as potential stakeholders. Moreover, I note that he has declassified intelligence material to support your investigation. The Australian government will use its best endeavors to support your efforts in this matter. While Australia's former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, the Honourable Alexander Downer, is no longer employed by the government, we stand ready to provide you with all the relevant information to support your inquiries. The acting White House Chief of Staff, the Honorable Michael Mulvaney, has been copied on this letter. Yours sincerely, the Honorable Joe Hockey." So this letter comes out, and it's after the New York Times tries to suggest that it was a scandal for President Trump to ask Australia to cooperate with an ongoing investigation. That was a letter that the New York Times used as apparent clear evidence that Trump, again, was doing the same thing with Ukraine, that he was asking for favors to attempt to withhold information from the Robert Mueller report. So shortly after the Times report was published, there was a source at the DOJ that pushed back on it, telling Fox News that countries have been helpful. There was no pressing required. Again, President Trump was not pressuring Australia or the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden or investigate the Russia collusion. These countries wanted to willingly help, and there was no threat of withholding anything, any aid or any benefit that the United States might give to that country. Quote, "The President was letting the heads of other countries know that the Attorney General will be contacting the appropriate law enforcement entities in each country," according to the DOJ official. When Barr was in Italy last week, he did talk to law enforcement officials about Durham's review, Fox News was told, the network added. The DOJ official also stressed that this has been a routine procedure in diplomacy, and that Barr would not usually reach out of his direct counterpart in other country unilaterally. And he said usually there would be an introduction of source made at the head of state level. Again, Barr is not going over to these countries, for example, Italy, and he's not forcing them to do anything. He's just introducing the event and seeing what the governments will do, and the governments have been extremely helpful in the case. The flood of new information surrounding the DOJ's investigation included a new reporting from the Washington Post, which sought to cast Barr in a negative light for conducting his job, claiming that he was trying to help Trump discredit Mueller's investigation. This is what the Post reports. Barr's personal involvement is likely to stoke further criticism from Democrats pursuing impeachment that he is helping the Trump administration use executive branch powers to augment investigations aimed primarily at the president's adversaries. But the high-level Justice Department focus on intelligence operatives conduct will highly cheer Trump and other conservatives for whom investigate the investigators has become a rallying cry. Barr has voiced his own concerns, telling lawmakers in April that he believes spying did occur when it came to U.S. investigation of the Trump campaign. Again, trying to use the Washington Post, trying to put Barr on the spot, saying that Barr's involvement in this effort is going to stoke criticism from the Democrats, and it obviously has, as they're pushing for impeachment at the moment. So this new and relevant information from the Post report was a revelation that Barr had been in contact with British intelligence officials and has traveled to Italy as part of an ongoing investigation. Barr has already made overtures to British intelligence officials, and last week the Attorney General traveled to Italy, where he and Durham met senior Italian government officials, and Barr asked the Italians to assist Durham, according to one person familiar with the matter. This is what the Post adds to that previous statement. It was not Barr's first trip to Italy to meet intelligence officials, the person said. The Trump administration has made similar requests of Australia, these people said. This is what Trump said of Barr in May. And I hope he looks at the UK, and I hope he looks at Australia, and I hope he looks at Ukraine. I hope he looks at everything, because there was a hoax that was perpetrated on our country. Again, Trump talking about the Mueller investigation and saying how he wants Barr to look at all these countries and figure out what's really going on. This is what the DOJ responds to the recent news reports that came out from the New York Times and the Washington Post. A Department of Justice team led by U.S. Attorney John Durham is separately exploring the extent to which a number of countries, including Ukraine, played a role in the counterintelligence investigation directed at the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. While the Attorney General has yet to contact Ukraine in contact with this investigation, certain Ukrainians who are not members of the government have volunteered information to Mr. Durham, which he has evaluated. Again, nothing being forced by any of these governments. These governments are willingly giving information to the Trump administration and to Barr and to Durham. And the Washington Post and the New York Times are trying to turn this around by claiming that it's obvious that Trump is forcing these governments to give information about Russia and about the Ukraine investigation. So it's another example of how the media is really trying to turn or spin stories around. These paragraphs that they put in their articles are pretty misleading, and if you read the letters that are actually sent, you can see that the governments of Italy or England or the Ukraine are being voluntary with their information that they're giving, and that they're not being forced by Donald Trump, and they're not being threatened by Donald Trump either. Okay, next story. We're going to go into the activists that are launching an effort to stop Ben Shapiro from speaking at Boston University. Now, this is a subject that's pretty touchy with me because I am a firm believer of the First Amendment, as really is any conservative. Ben Shapiro was set to speak at Boston University. This story came up a little bit, maybe a week or two ago, how the university moved Shapiro's event from a 1,500 person venue to a half of, I think, 700 person venue to let him speak, but to apparently to reduce violence and reduce security costs, which was an exorbitant amount. We'll go ahead and get to that story. So student activists at Boston University have launched a petition to ban Daily Wire editor-in-chief Ben Shapiro from speaking at an upcoming student organization-sponsored event. The petition, which smears the mainstream conservative political commentator and best-selling author as a racist hate monger, follows the university's attempt to downsize the event by half and force the event's host, the Young America's Foundation, to pay exorbitant security fees to protect against potential leftist violence. So the university first moves the event to a smaller venue, and second is making the Young America's Foundation pay a huge fee for security to prevent leftist violence, which to me, it's really strange when it's someone that's just coming to speak, to spread their ideas, and you have to pay to get other people from disrupting the event. It's so horrible that we've come to a point where free speech is, especially from conservatives, considered hate speech by a lot of people on the left. And it's just a horrible, horrible thing that we're going through. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get back to a point where we were in the past, where we can spread our beliefs and we don't have to be afraid about spreading our beliefs at all. And that's kind of why I'm doing this podcast, so that I can show conservatives, and especially young conservatives and Gen Z, that we need to be able to spread our ideas and be strong in our beliefs. Because if we're not strong in our beliefs, the left is going to shut us down, and eventually the country is going to become a completely democratic country. And we all know that that's not going to be a good idea, especially when we have a lot of democratic socialists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib that are getting close to becoming more and more in power. As Young America's Foundation's Kara Zupkis reports, the petition labels Shapiro a notorious racist and misogynist and condemns the university for allowing the mainstream conservative to voice his opinions on its campus. The petition paints the university's free speech suppressing move to dramatically reduce the audience size of the event and burden the AF with its unreasonable security fees as simply a self-serving effort to protect the university's image in light of progressive outrage over allowing conservatives to speak on campus. Extremely correct what Kara Zupkis is saying. The left is just trying to suppress Ben Shapiro by calling him a racist, by calling him a hate monger, by saying he's spreading hate speech. And when I get into what the petition actually says, you're going to understand what I mean. This is what the petition says. Recently, Young Americans for Freedom, a conservative political group, announced that it has plans to host a notorious racist and misogynist Ben Shapiro at Boston University. The announcement came as the group was told to cut its audience size and pay for security costs. These measures by the university were supposedly put in place for security reasons. However, the university is still open to giving Ben Shapiro a platform. They are simply concerned about their image. The cuts to audience size and security fees are a token measure, an attempt to appease students while still allowing Shapiro to come and speak. As students and community members of BU, we stand opposed to the proliferation of hate speech, and we are opposed to the university granting a platform to the disgusting and backwards ideology promoted by Shapiro and his ilk. This is not simply Shapiro exercising a right to free speech, but constitute discriminatory hate speech against whole sections of the population. Again, let me make this very clear. Just because you don't like what someone's saying does not make it illegal to say it. It's a differing opinion. You're going to have to deal with it. I hear differing opinions I have your leftist opinions every day, and I don't care. I love it when people have different opinions because you know what? We're not all the same. That's the beauty of being in America. We can all have a different opinion and we're not condemned, we're not arrested, we're not fined, we're not anything. And unfortunately, the left thinks that we should be fined and we should be jailed potentially for hate speech. But who determines what hate speech is? The person who's in power. So whatever the person in power determines what hate speech is what is going to be arrested and fined for. And then when the next person gets in power, it's going to be a different definition of hate speech. And that's what you call the slippery slope argument. And that's what's going to happen. Once you start putting a restriction, once you start putting a legal restriction on hate speech, for example, ban all speech that is racist. Okay, well, who determines what's racist? Obviously, there are racist comments saying that one race is superior to another race is obviously racist. Is it racist to everyone? No, because there's actual racists in this country. So if you have to find something, in my opinion, if you're going to ever ban hate speech, which I do not think you should ban because no one can really determine what hate speech is on a legal definition. If you're going to determine what hate speech is, you need to find something that everyone disagrees with, and that's impossible. There's no singular phrase that everyone in this country agrees with 100%. Yaf points out among the comments from those who have signed the petition are the students citing their need to feel safe on my own campus and declaring the belief that hate speech should not be free speech. Again, hate speech is free speech. There is speech that is hateful. I don't think hate speech as a definition from the left and what they're using, I don't think that's a real thing because that's what they're trying to use to separate free speech from speech that is hateful. I think that's a more correct use of the term hate speech that is hateful, because saying hate speech separates it from free speech, and that's what they're trying to do. That's what the left is trying to do with hate speech or speech that is hateful, trying to separate it, putting it in a different context. Like, for example, obviously we know that speech that directly calls for violence is not speech, it's not protected. It's a crime. You cannot directly call for violence. Hate speech is just saying something that you don't like, pretty much. And that's pretty much what's happening now. There's a definition version of hate speech that mentions it's speech against certain things that are unchangeable, race, gender, age, certain things like that. Okay, but who determines what's sexist, what's racist, what's bigoted, what's any of this stuff? That's the problem with trying to separate hate speech from free speech, and why I don't think banning hate speech is a good idea. We need to keep our free opinions in this country, or else we're going to go back to the dark ages where we are being controlled by a monarchy, and we're being controlled by a higher power that controls what we say and what we do. Okay, that is going to be it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Please make sure to give it a like and a follow or a subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And I'll see you, and hopefully you'll be here tomorrow. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you're listening to The Giraldo Show.